Alright, folks, pardon the kitchen nightmare. Send all your hate mail to Gordon Ramsay. But we had an unplanned work stoppage. Bit of a disaster occurred. So I had this perf board with the hooky wookies hanging up behind the stove with a whole bunch of these copper, well, fake copper anodized aluminum Moscow Mule mugs. You know how I know they're anodized? You put them in the dishwasher, they turn silver and chalky and terrible. So don't do that. So all that plus some blue balls over there, the blue balls, and that was all sitting on this little bit of granite resting on these books here. So what happened is the weight of that, I guess, over time cracked the adhesive holding the countertop together. And so the other day I spilled something. I went to pull the stove out to clean behind it, and the stove was just wedging that against the wall. So as soon as I moved the stove, a millimeter, kaboom, this, 30, 50 pound, whatever, big, heavy chunk of granite, mountain of glass and cups and just everything just plummeted behind the stove down here. I vacuumed it up now, but it was a mess. Yeah, my backsplash was the glass construction, blocks you see in fancy restaurants and bathrooms. Was just sitting across behind that, stacked up. So it was a lot of weight, a lot of mess. So what we're gonna do is unplanned home renovation. You don't have to have an education to fix anything. It just sometimes helps. All these books I can't throw away because I need to read them for the first time. Got stacked up and some cardboard shim stock from your local post office used to wedge up this guy, get it pretty well flush. This is a little bit lower than that, only because the glass stovetop just touches this. So I want this to be just underneath the edge when I back the stove up. I got the measuring implements out and then realized that, of course, I wanted it to be flush and double check with the ruler, but optional. So when making any home renovation, home improvement, fixing anything, always go to the store with Plan B. So the thing was originally put together with adhesive. I can't promise this adhesive will be the right color. I'm going to test it out. If it's clear or brown or close enough, I will probably try to use it. It is going to require pulling the granite out, putting some on the ends, and slipping it back into place. I used a file to scrape all the old, chip it. It was rock hard. Chip all the old adhesive. I think it was fiberglass resin. Chip it off the granite so that it would go in cleanly. But Plan A, and I think this will work better, is these corner brackets in the fence mending section of your local Banana Republic Home Depot. And unfortunately my studs run right dead center, well, close enough to dead center that, well, I can't have one bracket supporting the piece of granite teeter-totter style, so I need one on either side. Hopefully, one in the middle optional if I got one on each end. These are I still have some of the labeling left. They're like 80-pound drywall anchors, so if you live in a place with drywall, your house isn't made of concrete right up to the kitchen wall, then these are the go-to. If you live in a different place, good luck. So yeah, always go to the store with a Plan B. Buy both of them. It was like $4, or something for the brackets, and then a little bit more for the fancy glue. But construction adhesive says it does granite. Must be good. Yeah, the old rigid home wrecker. Yeah, so I'm gonna attack this thing, try to put some brackets in, see if that supports it, if I can get it close enough. If not, I'll re-level it with this stuff, or I'll just leave this stuff in place, put the brackets on either side, and then I'll come in, put the brackets in, get them flush, tighten them down, and then I'll probably drop it in with adhesive, just 'cause. I mean, the brackets won't stop it from slipping forward if I'm stupid about it, and the adhesive won't stop it from dropping straight down if it cracks at the edges unless the stove is wedged up against it. So yeah, we're gonna go for the 1-2 punch. Alright, forgive the stains and the mysterious unlabeled liquid. Before we start putting holes in our walls, we're gonna want figure out where our studs are. Now I already found it out, and I did this the cheap and easy way, way better than your local stud finder. Don't mind the who knows who did what over here. But easiest way to find a stud, cheapest way to find a stud. Can you tell how it just got high pitched right there? Low pitch, high pitch, low pitch, high pitch. Now, that's actually probably the second easiest way to find a stud. The really easiest way to find a stud is an electrical plug. You got an electrical plug for your stove. Don't yank the cord because it yanked this box slightly out of the wall. This thing, any kind of electrical box outlet, typically they're nailed, bolted, screwed, attached to a stud on one side or the other. So it's a little echoey down here in the hole between the cabinets, but this is high pitched right here. It's directly on this side of this guy, and it's directly in line with that spot we just found up top. So that's how you find a stud without a stud finder. It doesn't take batteries, and you know, finding the center is not an exact science, but if you just do the tap 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 from one side and find out where the pitch starts to go up, that's one edge. Do the tap 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 from the other side and find the pitch where it starts to go up, that's the other edge. Mark both lines. You know the stud is centered somewhere between there. Now you can either guess from the sound where the center is, or guess that the edges are on opposite sides of center, and know that the stud is, you know, some width depending on your jurisdiction, you know, 1.5 inches, or I forget what the thickness is. But I mean, if I do that, I typically, I think the marks end up about 1 inch apart, and you know, anything in between your pencil marks, anything in between your tapping sounds is probably good enough to put a screw in and just aim for the center. So it's not a science. You know, I was checking this out, and my countertop is like 1/4 inch higher on one side than the other. That's pretty atrocious. I mean, it seems pretty level. It looks level. You have no reference right now, Donnie, but it looks pretty level. Now, the same thing with the front edges, though. One of these sticks out almost 1/4 inch further than the other. I think that one sticks out further, and think this is the short one. So when I put the stove in and the edge of the glass comes right up to it, it takes enough, you know, contrast, takes your attention away. You won't realize it. Yep. So yeah. So there you go. I'm gonna prove myself wrong now by breaking all this stuff, and then follow it up after I injure myself. Okay, so step one is going to be get down here on your hands and knees and start apologizing. We got to figure out where we want our bracket. So I got some ugly nasty glue on the bottom side of this thing. This is not science. No one's ever going to see it again. I want to say I'm going to avoid where the glue is so that it sits flush. And I'm going to use a drill bit once I have put the phone down and have a free hand. And I'm going to come over here and mark these holes. Now, I can bend this bracket with a hammer, so a little bit low I can go up a little bit. If I go up too high, it's going to be slightly harder to bend that backside where it's reinforced with a dimple in the metal. I forget what they call that sheet metal term, but this little reinforcement is going to be really hard to lower the height of the bracket, but I can always raise the front edge by bending it open with a hammer. So I might flush it up, mark the holes, and then go slightly lower, but I'm going to try to do it pretty exact and then minimal hammering required to fit. And so I'll do that, mark up both sides, put both brackets in place. I'm just going to sit the shelf on top of them, the piece of granite, just going to sit on them. Note that they don't stick out totally all the way because the stove actually sticks out in the back, and it has clearly adequate clearance for this thin little bracket, but I didn't measure properly when I went to the store, so lesson learned. Use your ruler at home, write everything down, take the measurements with you, bring the ruler with you just in case the store doesn't have the exact measurements you need. I knew all of those things going into this, and I still screwed it up, so don't listen to what I say, listen to what I do. Screw up. Okay, step A complete. I had to shift my books a little bit, so I'm gonna double level this when I go to put glue on it. But the holes are marked. I just had a pencil by hand, so I circled around the holes, and I'm gonna drill center-ish, you know, with the Home Decker Pecker Wrecker. Yep. So drywall is super easy to drill. Try not to go through the electricals behind it that you don't know where they are yet. So yeah, go slow. Powder, 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 powder. Back up a little bit. Back up a little bit. Now, I'm not feeling so lucky right now. I should be through the thing, so I hope I didn't catch the edge of the stud. This always happens. But worst case scenario, I found a stud and I'll put a screw in it. Of course, I'm like 6 inches to the right of where I thought the stud was, so perfect place for some other sort of lateral reinforcement, of course. Might be plumbing, since I have this watering device, although given the way it's patched all over here, I feel like it goes off to the side. And also I think it's a copper pipe behind there, so I won't be able to drill through that conveniently. Let me get a flashlight and do some inspecting before I go too deep. Okay, business as usual. Turn on the light on the camera dummy. So I drilled the top hole, and it went straight through, no problem, super easy. The bottom one clearly has wood in it. I don't know if you can see, but I was getting little shavings out. So I found the magic reinforcement, and provided when I put a screw in it no water or electricity comes flying out, we should be okay. Now, I'm not going to explain how screws work for the hole with the wood in it, but I do like these pop toggles. Not only because they're rated to 80 pounds, if that's a real thing. I have a feeling that's probably like pull-out strength or pure shear. I don't know. One direction is going to be stronger than the other, but so you bend these things, guys, straight out. You see it's opaque now. Stretched it. That's good. That's what it's supposed to do. And you literally, you follow the directions. You drilled a 5/16 hole for this particular size. You hammer them through, and they have a little plastic peg you push in that pops them open, so they clamp on the back of the wall. Now, if you can't pop them open, that means there's an obstruction, and maybe you rotate them 90 degrees or something, you know. And obviously, it's not going to work in wood, and even if you bored all the way through the wood, it wouldn't expand. It would just be like a really big, soft nail. So don't do that. Just put a screw in it. If you want to be fancy about it, since you've already oversized this hole for the screw you want to put there, if you were just putting a screw in to hang like a picture, now you would be hooped because your screw head wouldn't stop at the wall or anywhere close to it. It could go right on through. Now, of course, you don't have to screw it in that far. But you can always cut the wings off one of these with some pliers and stick the plastic head in this hole and thread your screw through this and this. Now what happens is once this is popped open, imagine it's like this inside the wall, that screw threads in here and threads through here, so the screw also gives it some resistance in the middle. It doesn't want to slide up the threads. Now the threads can twist through it, but not slide, so it can be unscrewed. I mean, again, everything has a lifespan. Drywall is ultimately disposable in the long run. So, and down on here under the counter, no one's ever gonna know. So, but I use these all the time behind pictures and hanging things. They hold more than their fair share of the load. So, and always get the ones that are sized for your drywall. So they have a drywall thickness rating too that goes along with the weight. I'll just pick up the biggest size you can find if you have thin drywall. I mean, it probably will work, but you might find out nasty surprise when your wall comes tumbling down. Okay, so one cheese grade rounded out slotted Phillips Roberts drive screw from the pop toggle bag in the top, and one 10-penny Cine wad cutter from the jar of mystery screws in the garage in the bottom. It seems pretty sturdy. Of course, we always have that slight side effect of we shot for the moon and reached the stars, but the stars were outside our allowable tolerances, and now we'll float forever in space. It's a little high. Yep, I aimed low and it's high. But I can flex it down, so maybe I'll put some weight on top of it. It's still sitting on the stack of books, so maybe I'll take a shim out or put some weight on top of it when I glue it, and maybe the glue will be enough to take out. I mean, you can see it moving, but the difference is so thin that I feel like if I try to hammer this bracket to fit, it's gonna go opposite direction. So ought to be good enough. Now this brass embiggener is the third most used tool on the shop floor after the 8mm micro socket wrench and the giant yellow pry bar. This guy is the first thing I ever made on a lathe. Well, first thing that actually came out halfway workable. The knurling, of course, I missed a spot, and the beaten has turned it a little crooked, but it was a piece of brass bar stock turned down, piece of aluminum bar stock knurled, drilled a hole, press fit with a big old press, and hammered it down around it to pin it in place where it won't come off. And the crookedness I added by hand later by hitting things I shouldn't have, and so with the widening of the schnozzle there from banging on stuff. So yeah, actually it gets more use than any of the real hammers that I paid money for. So it's just the right size, just you know, it's not too small, but it's not heavy, so it's great for, you know, tapping on plastics, woods, things you don't want to break but you want to hit. So alright, so we got the both plastic doodads on this side, no surprises, and as is the natural order of things, we were slightly high on the right, now we're slightly low on the left, and as I mentioned, the actual countertops weren't actually level. However, I went in the direction that was even worse than level than the counter itself. So I'm gonna shim this side up when I do the gluing. Hopefully that will bring the other side down a little bit, and if not, I'll put weight on the right side. Oh, huh. Well, it's about level now. Of course, it shifts every time I breathe on it. But yeah, I'll get both sides good and square. You can see what looks like the saw marks here. Polisher maybe. Oh, there's a deep one over on this side. Interesting. Tile saw, something like that. I'm not a granite guy. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, so I'll shim it up and then I'll pop it out and put some glue on it and pop it back in, and that's what he said. So we inserted the construction glue into the Magnum syringe, and we clipped just the tip and stuck a screwdriver into the foil down inside it to pop it open. Those guys at Loctite know how to pick the perfect sort of gold brown snotty color. We'll see how it looks when it gets on the granite right on the top where I don't want it and can't wipe it off. Excellent. Okay, so got it in there. I had to put it in and glue it, take it out, glue it some more, put it back in, glue it. I got that backwards. I took it out, put glue on, smeared it down with some of the piece of paper, cardstock, priority mailbox. Smeared it on both ends, both sides, this piece, that piece, both ends. Put it in. If it was too thin to fill all the gaps, so I took it out, doubled up on it. Now it's too thick. So now's the part where we go to the tube of adhesive and read the instructions and find out how long it's going to cure and what we did wrong in the process. Also I need to figure out what I can scrape this off with to not smear it everywhere, but I'll figure that out. I think it says alcohol, and I'll try to scoop it with a bit of paper and then wipe what's residue is down with alcohol. An option, although this may get rock hard like the other stuff, I don't know if it will be tacky, but an option could be to use a razor blade after the fact to flatten it out. But I want to get as much off while it's heavy as possible so I don't break any razor blades and stab myself trying. Okay, give it some time. Okay, the Loctite construction adhesive tube says to let cure for 24 hours before removing mechanical support. So I guess this is staying here for another day. And it says to clean up with mineral spirits, but I am not a practicing member of the Shinto religion, so I don't believe in mineral spirits, and I'm going to scrape it off with a piece of cardboard. Let's see how this goes. You know, could probably come back with a paper towel to chase it. That worked halfway. Ugh, this is going to be a mess. Maybe we'll get a clean piece of cardboard before I spread it any worse than I already did. Alright, so it looks pretty good now. I did a, flawless job of scraping that gray schnot down, sorry if I offended any members of the Shinto religion. I don't know if you have Shinto karma, but right after my flawless, immaculate scraping job of making everything perfectly clean, I immediately dropped my snotty piece of cardboard right on the floor. So if anyone's a believer in mineral spirits, I am now. Another pro tip, and just a tip mind you, when you're done with your tube of caulk, you get your saran wrap. The aluminum foil doesn't really work too well because it leaves too many creases where air can get in, and seal off your caulk. This is still oozing, so it's swelling my plastic. Seal all the air out, and it will do absolutely nothing to keep it from drying up, but it will serve as a warning to the next guy who sees it to buy more glue before the next project in 2 years' time. Alrighty, I think that about covers it. I guess I'll follow up if this doesn't work.